If you hear my dog bark, it's because somebody's doing firecrackers in the neighborhood and my dog is all upset.
Thought perhaps it was a late mail delivery.
Okay, Bruce, you are out on YouTube and yeah, we are recording.
All right. Okay, thank you. I call to order the Town of Rochester Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for June 17th, 2021. And I will take the roll call. Ms. Bressler? You have to come off mute.
Here.
Present.
Here.
Mr. Wassel?
Present.
I'm Bruce Saris, I'm present. And Isabel Vinton?
Present.
And also attending is Mary Lou Christiana, the town attorney, and Mike Baden is performing as the meeting host for both Zoom and YouTube. So I've confirmed with the town's council that tonight's meeting has convened in accordance with the governor's March 13th, 2020 executive order 202.1, which suspends certain provisions of the open meetings law to allow a municipal board to convene a meeting via video conferencing. In accordance with the executive order, the public has been provided with the ability to view tonight's meeting via YouTube, and a transcript will be provided at a later date. I've completed the roll call of the board members, and there is a quorum present for this meeting. Let me just complete that a little bit more. Mr. Fisher, please, I'll mark him as absent, and Mr. Barringer is also absent today. I've also confirmed that this meeting has been duly noticed. We've fulfilled our legal requirements by posting notice on the town clerk's bulletin board outside the door and posting legal notice in the Shawangunk Journal and posting notice on the town's website. So with that, we have just one application in front of us today, the continuing application of John Sturgis related to an area variance on 442 Towpath Road. The parcel's in the R2 zoning district. It's plus or minus 1.7 acres. And Mr. Sturgis proposes the erection of a single family residence, does not meet the 100-foot setback for the high water mark. And the proposed structure is 70 feet away from the high water line, and he would require a 30-foot variance. So is Mr. Sturgis also in attendance?
I'm on.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Sturgis. If you could just walk us through again your application briefly, and then we can review the documents that we have found since they were submitted last month.
Okay, do you have the documents from 2014?
We do.
Okay.
Is there one in particular you'd like to call our attention to?
Yes, well, when I did the initial, because there was a permit issued on those documents, the site survey has a FEMA exempt flood exemption attached to it. I had it surveyed, and so we had the FEMA exempted the property for the building site away from the flood zone, and that was all submitted as part of that and should be part of that file.
Right.
And then you also had the house plans, obviously, which were for a larger dwelling at that point that proved to be too expensive for us. Once it got down to initiating construction, you should have seen the health department percolation test results in there. And one other item, the superintendent of highways designated where he wanted the driveway access point. I don't know if that's in the record or not. So nothing has changed with this current submission, except for the fact that it took us a while to find what we thought was a better cost option, and it turns out to be a smaller dwelling. By that point, the permit had expired, and now we're ready to move forward. But on the first permit, we had installed underground power. It was up for a little over a year. We weren't using it, so Central Hudson discontinued power delivery to that, and we took away the meter. So that's where we stand. And I just wanted to call your attention to the FEMA flood exemption survey that was with the original materials submitted.
Okay, thank you. So I know we had some discussion in our last meeting regarding the floodplain and the high water line. And it appeared to me that there was some confusion in our interpretation of that, not on your behalf, but amongst the board members. And I just wanted to be clear that, you know, the floodplain and the high water line are two different things, right? The water line, the high water line is not defined in our glossary of terms. So in that case, what we do is refer to the dictionary for the definition. So just for the board listening, the definition of the high water line in Merriam-Webster is the line of the shore of the sea, of a lake, or of a river. In this case, it would be the Peterskill, which the waters usually reach at high water. The line marks the limit of the rise of the median tides of the sea between the spring and neap tides, or two, the line marks the limit of the soil so affected by the water of a lake or river as to have a natural and vegetation distinct from that of the banks. So really what it is, if you can visualize it, it's where the vegetation begins at the side of the riverbank is the high water line. So let's keep that in mind, you know, when we're evaluating it. So, you know, which is very distinct from the floodplain, which Mr. Sturgis points out is marked on the survey map. I think there's hash marks that indicate where that is. So, okay. And
yeah, that's supposed to be, I believe, a 1 in 100 year flood.
Right, that's correct. That's what it was. So I also know that in looking at, you know, health department regulations around the septic, that typically that certification expires in 5 years. So I believe that the health department documentation that you provided is in fact expired.
Okay.
So
we can, well,
yeah.
it can be done. I didn't know that was denied on that basis. In fact, because I'm not even sure. I don't quite understand why the permit was denied. I would also like an explanation for that.
So, I'm sorry, by which permit are we speaking about?
The current permit.
So the current permit,
because the first one was approved,
right,
and this one is denied.
Right. So I don't know what changed in the zoning ordinance between the time of the first permit approval, and I believe that was in 2014, right?
Correct.
Right. And what zoning laws have been revised between then and the current 2021? I know the reason that it was denied by the code enforcement officer this time was because the house was sited within that 100-foot setback of the high water line, right? Because it was sited at 70 feet rather than 101 feet, right? So that's the reason for the variance requirement and the
There
denial.
have been some changes in the law since 2014, and I'm not sure, but it may have been one of the changes that 100-foot from the high water line.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
Okay.
So, but in that time, in that duration, you know, one of the things that we would certainly consider is where the septic is placed and whether that's in accordance with, you know, the current Board of Health policies of Ulster County. And in that it's expired, you know, I think that it would be easier for us to review and to make and have sufficient information to make a determination if that was more current or valid, right? Since it's expired. The other thing,
to me?
yeah, that's a question to you is, are you able to, I would hope you would be able to obtain a current
I definitely see where you're going and why that's important. But he won't be able to get a building permit if he doesn't have the health department,
Okay,
um,
Well, that should be a simple matter.
certification.
so
So,
that could certainly be a condition of the
right,
zoning.
yes,
Fair enough.
yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, got it. Just want to be sure on that. The other thing, Mr. Sturgis, in reviewing the site plan itself, there weren't a lot of dimensions noted on the plan. You know, the distance of the house from the stream. The one thing that was noted that was clear was how far the house and the septic was from the well. You know, they drew sort of that 100-foot radius around it, but we didn't have an opportunity to see how far the house is from the side setbacks, how far it is from the front setbacks, how far it is from the septic field, how far it is from the high water line even, to help. And
It's
that's
on the site. Is it on the site plan?
those dimensions were not.
Well, the site plan has a scale to it. So just, I would say, and on top of that, there's a ravine. My understanding is some of the board members had visited the property. I know some of the markers have been moved. And there is a ravine actually between the stream and the side of the house, with the house well above the ravine.
Right. So the difficulty with the scale is, you know, it's printed on a piece of paper that will all print out different size pieces of paper. So it's hard to determine what the scale is in relation to the actual dimensions.
Okay.
So
I guess I'm used to using scales and maps all the time, so I don't understand that.
okay.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Sorry,
Yeah.
another fireworks. So we're being joined by Cooper tonight. She may pop up in the screen at any moment. So was this map presented, is this the map that was presented to the building department when you applied for a building permit and they said you need a variance? Was this part of that package?
This map, you should have 2 copies of it. It was presented in 2014, and it was presented just this year.
Right. What I'm asking is this just presented to the planning board, or is this the same map that was presented to the building department when you applied for?
Building department.
Okay.
That was,
So,
and this was the map on which the permit was issued.
all right. So, Bruce, I
Yeah.
think that probably Jerry scaled this out because he only gave us one variance to look at. We can't look for other variances to look at if,
That's understood, Mary Lou, but there's certainly opportunity to see where, if the house was cited differently, where it would minimize the
Okay.
amount of variance required in an
Okay, I
alternative
understand.
position.
I understand where you're going now. Okay.
And provide us with the opportunity to say, you know, if you move it to the north or you move it to the south or you move it in a certain direction, that it wouldn't violate a side yard setback and relieve the requirement for the
right.
water line setback.
Okay, I understand where you're going. Thank you.
Is that, and I don't believe that to be an unreasonable,
Sure, you're supposed to grant, if you grant a variance, it's supposed to be the least
The
amount of
minimum
variance,
necessary.
right, the minimum variance.
right? So I would ask Mr. Sturgis, in order to make our job a bit easier, if we were able to have that map documented with the appropriate dimensions on there so that we could understand the front yard, side yard setbacks and setback from the water line and rear property line.
Okay. It's, let me ask, did people, members of the board visit the property?
I
Get a
know I
feel for-
have. I did. And let me
Okay,
ask, first of all, Mr. Wassel, did you visit? I believe he has. And Ms. Bressler, have you
Yes,
visited?
I did visit.
So
But
I know
Sorry, I
that,
was,
you
I
know,
was just on
I think
mute.
looking at a
It's Mike.
map and
Yeah.
understanding, you know, how it's scaled, and then being there in person feel very different.
Okay. Because the property is going to be on the, what I would call the high, well, it was situated
Yes.
on the high side of the ravine, and the ravine just drops below it. That's why I said it was useful to actually visualize, see the property and see how that ravine drops away.
Right.
It's over my head. It's actually at the lower part of the ravine. It might be 12 to 15 feet above the ground area of that
Right.
ravine, the top of the property, and you know the ravine slopes down. So that's you know, the way I visualize it is that the first floor of the property would be probably somewhere between 6 and 8 feet above the low point of the ravine, which would be well above any flood area.
yeah, again,
But-
the flood isn't really, the floodplain is not the issue in this situation. So,
Okay.
right, it's the distance between the proposed side of the house and the high water line, and how that relates to the side and front yard setbacks as well, is really what,
Because what I'm saying, it's well above the high water line, even though, and I'm not even sure where the high water line would be there,
right,
because the property slopes down so rapidly.
right.
At least, you know, it's hard to guess that. I mean,
Right,
like I
and
say,
the dimension, right, and the question for the variance isn't the height above the water line, it's the distance from it, not the height from it. The height isn't in consideration in this situation. So I would agree with you
Right.
that having walked the property, it certainly is the place between the, I'm going to call them snow poles, I don't know how else to phrase it, where you've marked
Yeah,
out
there's
where
snow
the
poles,
house would be,
right.
that site is certainly, you know, well above the ravine, because it's sort of the
Mhm.
ravine, and then you come up a little bank, and then you go down to the Peterskill, right? So,
Right, correct.
yeah, I see where it's above. I agree with you, but the distance between where those poles are measured to the Peterskill are the dimensions that are in question, or the dimensions that are, you know, part of the variance requirement. So,
Okay, so
let me just ask if I could just if you could just hold on, Mr. Sturgis, for a moment. You know, this was sort of my question with the survey map. I don't know if the other board members share the same concerns, so I'd just like to, you know, open the conversation to them to see if they also have similar concerns. Mike, I don't know if you're on, if you can come off mute quickly.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Michael.
Thank you. And sorry about the intermittent background noise that you're going to hear. So yeah, I do share, you know, the concern. I do agree that it would be very helpful to have those measurements to be able to, you know, see what opportunities are available for the location of the proposed structure. I have some additional concerns that I'll share, just in terms of like general categories, and I can get more specific, but just big picture, when I look at the proposal and the size of the lot, there's some what I feel are space limitations. There are, as Mr. Sturgis has already mentioned, there's steep slopes. There's obviously the waterway, the Peterskill, and there's a rock outcropping, and there's when you take I think it's 1.7 acre lot in an R5 zoned area, and you start adding in, so the footprint of the proposed structure, then you're going to have the septic field. You have to have a reserve. You're going to have a driveway. You're going to have a parking space, and then you're going. I believe there's a proposed shed as well. You begin eating like a significant portion of the buildable area of that lot. So that's one general sort of observation. Also hasn't been mentioned much, but the character of the neighborhood. I'm very familiar with that neck of the woods, and they're basically cabins and cottages there. I don't think there's anything other than cabins and cottages, and they're so a cottage, I had to look it up, but I think it's 1,000 to 2,000 square feet. A cabin is typically smaller, and it could be unfinished on the inside. So we're talking about small structures, and they're spread apart, along the river there pretty far. And this would be kind of shoehorning a structure in between two existing cabins slash, I think there's even an A-frame in the neighborhood. Slash cottage. So that's another concern, just like kind of the character of the neighborhood. And then I guess last but certainly not least, it's a very environmentally, ecologically sensitive area of our town. And so doing a lot of building on a relatively small lot, there's certain challenges there. I wanted to raise them. There were things that I observed when I went out there and I looked at the site plan. I just think that they're worth bringing up and discussing today, and if there are future meetings to talk about them in those forums.
Right at the fork. Follow signs for I-287 North.
Sure. Mike, you're certainly welcome to bring them up as you please. If you want to discuss them now, we can discuss them now. Sure.
Yeah, well, okay. I'll try to be brief, but I did take some notes. So on the variance application, I noticed, number 14, there's a opportunity to list any physical restrictions. I personally noted that there are rock outcropping, steep slopes, and a waterway. I don't believe those items were mentioned in the application. In terms of the environmental sensitivity, I'm sorry, Mr. Sturgis, were you? Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, because the area where the dwelling is anticipated is flat. Can't tell you if there's rock under it, but I would say the soil around it was excavated with the health department for their test, and went down about 8 feet. So, I can't guarantee what's there. There is a boulder. I wouldn't call that a rock outcropping. That's going to have to be removed. But where the site of the actual dwelling is, it could be all glacial till. It could be as deep as the ravine. So it could be just soil, large rock and soil. So I don't know yet.
Okay. Well, there is the understood and appreciate that. There is the waterway, obviously, posing a physical restriction on the lot.
How is
there-
that a restriction?
Well,
It's
we're just
inconsistent
talking
with
about
the-
that. The variance
Yeah.
is all about the distance from the proposed structure to the high water line, and so that is I think the main restriction that we've been talking about, and the purpose of this variance application, right?
Well, is it the high water line or is it the 1 in 100-year flood line?
It's the high water line. I think Bruce did a great job in explaining that in the beginning of the meeting. And I think maybe it's worth going through again, just to make sure we're clear on what the variance is, what you're seeking in this variance. But maybe we do that in a little bit.
Okay.
And I recall in our last meeting, first meeting on this application, Mary Lou, you kindly pointed out the short environmental assessment form is not a requirement for our consideration. However, you did say there are things that can be considered in that application for the purposes of, reviewing and considering this application, things that were noted in that environmental assessment form. And so if we could just return to that, I did notice a couple of things, and I think in our last meeting called them discrepancies. There are discrepancies between what was submitted on that short environmental assessment form by Mr. Sturgis and what New York State Department of Environmental Conservation had noted on the same questions. But we did notice some discrepancies. So,
Michael, before you continue, let's also note that those were, also 6+ years apart as well. So things may have been revised by the state too in that time frame. So just to be clear. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, fair-
that first,
fair
may
enough.
I say the first one was submitted by the builder, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So
I did not,
it's-
okay, so that's where you're getting that from. That was done by Dave Smith, who
Okay.
was going to be the contractor for the first go at this.
Right.
Okay, so
So
the one I submitted was the one you see recently.
okay. Fair enough. Thank you. Okay, Michael, please continue. I'm sorry.
well, I guess, we're covering old ground a little bit, but one of the questions I think is 13, does the property contain wetlands? I believe the answer was in a negative in the form that had been filed by the applicant. I question whether the Peterskill would qualify for a waterway wetland. To me, it seemingly does. So I think there's some inconsistencies that in that environmental assessment form. There are things that I believe are important in considering the environmental impact that the proposed structure would have on the property and the neighboring community. And so I think that that's all part of what I think about when I look at the proposal. I look at what's the impact to the character of the neighborhood, what's the impact on the environment or ecology of the area, and are there space limitations to putting in the proposed property in such a small lot, which is zoned R5. And it seems like we're starting in a deficit at 1.7 acres in an R5 zone, area. So it's like you're starting in the hole in a deficit, and then there are these steep ledges, and you're within that 100 feet of the high water line, and you know it's a challenging proposal. I'll just leave it at that.
I did have I did submit, this is for the other site, 436, which I abandoned to do anything on. And I went to review with the State Conservation Department, a gentleman out of New Paltz. The Petersville is not deemed, it is a waterway, but not a wetland. Wetlands are swampy down by where Coxon Kill is, where you have a lot of reeds and grasses. So it's slow. Apparently it has to do with the flow of the water. It's just where the house was going to be situated. It seemed to be, it wasn't designated an endangered area by the state. He gave me the maps, and then we went through the maps. It seems to be the Coxon Kill, that whole flat area where the beavers are built. That is all definitely wetland because of all the wildlife that's there.
Right.
I did. So I filled out the environmental impact statement accordingly.
Right.
That's where that came from.
Okay. Thank you. Jill, are there any questions that you have or follow-up items for Mr. Sturgis?
I mean, so I went to go see it, and I think like everybody, there's a lot of uneven ground, and it does seem like, having more direction, having more of a, measurements feels necessary to determine whether we can grant a variance. I find it difficult to be able to make any kind of informed decision without that. That's all I have right now,
I can get the surveyor to put some dimensions on the map. What dimensions, what specific measurements do you want them set back from the road?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a sense of what kind of direction I need to give the surveyor.
So typically
the
what we've...
water line is marked. The flood line is marked. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, the flood line is marked, and that's fine. That's great. I think we need to see the dimensions from the high water mark, right, of the structures like the proposed site of the house, the septic, the well, right? And then the front and side yard setbacks for the house, so that we know the distance that the house is from the property line to the left, the property line to the right, those kind of things. So those are always pretty helpful. I think, who did your survey? Medenbach did that?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm familiar with them. They've done surveys for me, and they're quite good, and they're very familiar with both the zoning and planning in the town of Rochester. So they probably have a very good idea of what dimensions they need to provide to us. They've done it, for past applicants.
Okay.
So I think if you tell them they want the dimensions of the setbacks and things like that, I think they'll probably be able to run with that. I don't think you're going to have to provide them with a lot of direction. So.
Okay. The setback and the health department.
You're not going to need. No, I think you're not going to require that because, as Mary Lou pointed out, in order to get the building permit, you're going to have that revised anyway. So we're not going to require that from you.
Okay. Now, I did mention some concern about too many structures along the road. I own the adjacent structure at
Right.
The address is 436, and that's going to be taken down. That will be demolished.
Right.
It's not a sound structure. And I've had tools stolen from the shed that was there. So right now the house itself, which is locked, is used as for tool storage. But it's weak. It's just not suitable really for much of anything. And so
Yeah.
that's going to be coming down should a dwelling go up in this other site.
Right, okay,
That will go back towards, and probably what we'll do is we'll link the two lots together, make them one lot. Because that lot is not going to likely be buildable anyway. So it might be just for recreation for the entire property.
right.
So that's a consideration with you owning both lots. I'm gonna beat Bruce to this question, but if Bruce, you want to ask it, go ahead.
No, please.
If you do join those two lots into one lot, would you then
Right.
be able to replace this house so that you wouldn't need a variance?
No, because it's the same question came up. The house itself sits on the floodplain, and they said I could replace
I'm sorry, the existing structure sits on the
the
floodplain.
existing structure sits on the floodplain.
Okay,
They said I could replace it. I could build there, which I tell you, it boggles my imagination why somebody would even say that. I wanted to move it out of the
Oh.
floodplain.
right,
And that wasn't permitted, but I could build on the same footprint, which didn't make sense to me because you couldn't get anything insured.
right. So that's part of the way one of the regulations reads for reconstructing on a non-conforming lot. You're able
Right.
to replace the existing structure and repair it, but you're unable to expand it or move it if
Has
it
been
will
the same
violate
footprint.
other setbacks. So, but where we were going with this is, if these lots were combined now, right, it would still be a non-conforming lot. But if you were to move this structure somewhere in between the house that currently exists in the floodplain and the proposed house, so that it's outside of the watermark, right, on the new, I think you have about the same acreage on both, so let's call it three plus or minus acres. Could you cite it somewhere in the combined lots, right, that wouldn't require a variance? And that's part of why having those dimensions would be really helpful in helping identify that. So,
Well, if I moved it closer to the road, that could be done in the existing lot. Just move
Right.
it closer.
so why not do that, I guess, is the question.
Well, because I wanted to do it on the high point of the property, and it
Right.
just have the other space available for just have it open, and it would be part of where the septic would be.
Right.
I would have extra room for 30 years from now. If I had to redo the septic, I'd have plenty of space to do that, as opposed to
Yeah.
putting a house there.
Right.
Further towards the middle, because I was going to have it sit closer to the edge of this ravine that goes down.
Right.
Being above wherever the water might ever be, it would still be safe from that. And that's really what the thought process was. The rest of the property where the driveway comes in, that's all stone. There's a lot of stone very close, so that's not really. I don't consider that buildable, because you'd have to, you want to run your utility lines, so you'd actually have to cut through stone to channel it, to get utility lines either to the house or to, because I have underground power installed.
Right.
And if you wanted to run septic, you'd have to cut a line in the stone to run your septic line out. So I'm
Okay,
doing
so
it in the
because of
area.
the rock, you
It's
wouldn't
challenging.
be, okay, that's good to know.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So there's rock on the what I call the northern side of the property, and so yes, I could move the house closer to the road,
Right.
and it probably would meet the setback. It just, I thought it was better placed where it had been cited by the surveyor.
Right.
That's all. I just thought
Understood.
it
Okay.
seemed to make the best use of what we could see was likely to be the soil underneath. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
So, but I can get the
Okay.
setback number.
Okay. Yep. So, is there, before we, the board's going to discuss this sort of amongst ourselves. So before we
Okay.
do so, is there anything else that you'd like to add before we, I guess, put you on mute and have our discussions? And I'll also ask Jill and Michael if there are any more questions before we do that.
Okay. Do you want me to, I'll ring off and then you'll have your discussion, correct?
Well, you
Oh,
can
no,
stay
you can
on.
stay on.
You can stay on. We're just,
Okay.
I just
Stay on
don't,
in case they come up with another question.
yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Sturgis, the point, the reason for putting you on mute is more that, we don't want it to become a debate with you. We want to be able to discuss it
Okay,
amongst,
well, I
have
want-
a debate amongst us, right?
Yeah, you're right. I just want to give you relevant information where I think
Yeah,
thought it.
exactly. Yeah.
So,
Yes.
but
Thank
so
you for
fine.
understanding.
Put me on mute. Put me on
Okay.
mute. I'll stand by.
Okay, so any other questions for Mr. Sturgis before we mute him?
Well, I have a quick, it's Mike here. Thanks for your patience, Mr. Sturgis. I really appreciate it. So the site plan, if you're considering combining the two properties, I'm wondering if we could see, in addition to the distances that we've been discussing, to see both properties together. And then we can maybe better appreciate and understand some of the issues that you were discussing with the, in terms of cutting through bedrock, and are there any other, locations that would be suitable, that type of thing. So I'm just wondering if that would be possible, or would it be a good idea for us to have that information at the same time?
Glad to give it to you. But I think that when you look at it, you'll see that the site that I'm proposing here is really the only site, because of the soil conditions, its standoff, its elevation, its standoff from the stream. You'll see that everything else is too narrow. It's too close. And
Too narrow between the road and the high water mark.
Correct. It's just okay. And I went through this with the
engineers,
with Jerry, and we went back and forth with it. And even where the existing cabin exists, you see the rock has been washed clean because people have parked there, killed the plants. This is over the last 150 years, and so when it floods every 40 years or whatever it is, 100 years, it washed away the soil, so it's all bare rock. And so my proposal was to put a new structure on that bare rock, but out of the flood zone. And okay, I was going to bring in soil to build it up, so that we would divert the water, any flood waters that may occur every 50 years, basically around the property. It goes down the road, and it does normally go down the road in a major flood. But then we just thought it was too complex. Gave it up.
Understood. Thanks for your answer. I don't know what's involved, if it's a lot of trouble to include both lots, but I think it would be still helpful. But
I'll have to drive it down, or I can put it in a mail to you. How would you like it? How soon would you like to have it?
If it goes to the town, then the town will make it available to all of us.
Okay. It's a
Yeah,
big map.
the mail is fine. The mail is fine. We have we have another month till the next meeting, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get it.
Thank you. That's all I
Okay.
have.
Thanks, Michael. Jill, anything for Mr. Sturgis before we?
No, I'm good.
You're good. Okay. Mr. Sturgis, I'm going to ask Mr. Baden to put you on mute so that we can speak and.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. All right. So, Michael and Jill, I just want to point out just a couple of things in the code itself. And this is under section 140-12 yard setback regulations. And section E deals specifically with waterfront yards and basically says, you know, each yacht lot fronting a named stream, and I'm just going to paraphrase this rather than read it verbatim, shall include that setback of 100 feet in depth from the high water mark of such stream, right? And we're authorized certainly to accommodate reasonable use of the properties outside of the floodplain, provided other mitigating measures such as deed covenants, limited clearing near the stream are employed to protect the stream quality. So Mike, this is speaking to your environmental concern that certainly we could place a condition on it that there's a deed covenant to limit further clearing of the land in order to protect the environment and the stream around that, right? So just so you're aware. Yeah. So
Appreciate that.
yeah, no, because it is a key consideration. I agree with you there that, you know, it is, to me, looking at it, although it may not be marked environmentally sensitive, you know, there are bald eagles in the neighborhood. You see them down by the bridge near the crested hen and all. So, you know, certainly protecting that is important. So
It's the bald eagle's habitat. You know, there's not a nest on a lot, I'm sure, but you know, it is less than a half mile down the road where you have a nest in their habitat. I know a lot of trees are already down, and
right.
yeah, I think the less disruption, the better.
Right. So the other thing I wanted to point out is, you know, Mr. Sturgis has the right to build on this property, right? We're not here to deny him a building permit and the ability to build on the property, right? He has that right. And it's just, how do we accommodate that requirement in a way that is sensitive to the area and still allows him to build and make good, reasonable use of the property and the structure as well. So just to keep those things in mind, that we're not here to say, no, you can't build, right? So, okay.
I'm
I
just
also-
bringing
I
up
also-
some challenges.
Yeah, I also felt like I appreciated the discussion that came up when he said he owned the property next door and we were trying to
Yeah.
solve a problem for him. I'm also feel sensitive to somebody who owns property having a desire to site their home in a certain place. But I'm curious with the adding is it a covenant for the environmental impact? How does that impact the available space he has to build? Do we know that yet?
Well, it wouldn't impact the space that he's on, right? It would say that certain activities aren't available to him, you know, clearing the land and things like that, right? So that, you know, you can't clear cut that, right?
Got it. Okay.
That
Great.
kind of thing, right? That would be, and we'd have to, you know, and you know, total transparency here. We haven't, in my time, put many, if any, conditions on some of the zoning permits, and specifically nothing in this section. So I'd have to do a bit more research and probably consult with Mary Lou on what is reasonable, because we can't be unreasonable in that either. That's not fair to any of us, right? To Mr. Sturgis, nor to the people that come after him. So.
Right.
Yeah, so I think I share some of the concerns about being close to that high water line and trying to balance that with the septic and the other setbacks. You know, the dimensions would certainly help me out considerably to see how we might accommodate that if there are alternatives available to reduce the amount of variance required. You know, maybe if it's moving it 30 feet and then not requiring it, or if it's moving it 15 feet and, you know, splitting the baby kind of thing, so that you can still enjoy the property and we can still protect what we feel might be necessary. So, with that, yeah. So I don't know that we're ready for a public meeting on this yet. So I would motion that we table this till the next session so that we can review the dimensions and the site plan in a bit more
Mr.
detail.
Chairman, would you consider scheduling a public hearing contingent on him having the maps with those changes into us 2 weeks before the meeting? I'm just thinking, last time we didn't have everything, it was in, but we didn't have it.
You're right, that wasn't very fair. Agreed. I think I would consider that. If we can get it in within 2 weeks prior, that'll give us enough time to review. Do you feel the same? Yeah. So I would propose that motion that we'll have Nicole schedule the public hearing for next meeting contingent upon receiving the revised survey drawings indicating the dimensions 2 weeks prior to that meeting.
Right, and that meeting is, just so you know when the 2 weeks prior is. That meeting will be July 15th.
Okay,
So we would need everything in by July 1st.
right.
Also, I would recommend, and of course it's up to the applicant, he was telling us about the rocks and the putting in the utilities and having to maybe go through rock. I would suggest that he also submit, if he'd like to, a narrative that explains those things, so it's very clear in the record.
Right. So can we get, is there a second for the first motion on the public scheduling the
sorry.
public meeting?
I second it.
Okay, so let's take a roll call vote. Mr. Wassel,
Aye.
Ms. Bressler,
Aye.
and Mr. Saar says aye as well. So we have that. Mary Lou, you threw me off my train of thought. There was one other thing I was going to ask about.
Sorry, I do that.
Yeah, it worked. It will come back to me.
Were you gonna ask about the other yard and showing some of
No,
that?
I was gonna, oh, sorry, now I know what it was. I was gonna suggest to Mr. Sturgis that since the public meeting will be coming and we'll be notifying the neighbors, it would be great if he's able to get letters from close by neighbors, in favor of the construction and in favor of that kind of move. That always helps, that if the neighbors are in support of the project that you're undertaking. So sort of in line with your, I'm
What
sorry.
about the health department document that's out of date? Is that also something that has to be updated for this next meeting?
So,
You don't
as
need the
Mary,
health department
yeah,
the building department needs the health department information. The
Okay.
zoning
Yeah.
board doesn't.
Okay.
so it's covered off under that. Right. So good idea though. So, okay, so with that, Mike, maybe you can unmute Mr. Sturgis and we can be sure that he understands what we're asking, so that, and see if he feels he can accommodate that. So.
Because he's on the phone, he's got to hit star.
There he goes. Okay, perfect. So,
Back on, I
Mr.
think.
Sturgis, yeah. So, I don't know if you were able to catch all that we said, that we're going to schedule the public hearing contingent upon you providing the revised surveys by July 1st.
All right,
Okay,
that's no
And then-
problem, should be no problem.
good. And then if you're able to get the neighbors, to voice their support of your project, certainly, if they send a letter or an email into the zoning board secretary, that always is helpful, so that we can have, their perspective on the project as well.
Okay. I can work on that.
Thank you. Yeah.
One of them may or may not be around, but I know, one of them rents, the other, actually, they both rent on the Tetlow area. If
Yeah.
you know those properties. So,
I don't.
okay, that's right near the bridge.
Yeah, okay. Oh, great.
The building's closest to the bridge, up front on my side of the bridge. So
Right.
it's they're adjacent. That'll be good. Okay,
Right.
I can do that.
All right, thank you. And then just for my own curiosity, I did notice when I was walking the property, that ravine seems as if if water was overflowing that in your neighbor with that white cottage next door to you, it seems like that water would channel right into their living room, It's just one of those observations that I had. I wondered if that had happened to them.
It did. Yeah, she had to be. I wouldn't say she was rescued, but it was thigh high for her.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because
Wow.
when if you have a big rain directly behind her the little cottage,
Yep.
it's basically the same level of the stream. The only reason why the stream water doesn't come in there is you've got the banks simply directed down the side.
She
So,
seems to
you're
have
right.
like a little cistern there or something as well that I was,
There's a spring at the end of the, if you go walk down the ravine, there's a very small spring. It trickles, but they filled up the entire cistern with that.
Yeah.
But it came around. Some of it may have come through the ravine. Some of it came probably directly from this. It just lifted it up.
Yeah.
And lifted the roof of that cistern off. They look like they've cleared it out. There were a lot of sticks trapped there.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
This was, I think, Sandy. Melissa, who's in the white cottage, has it all on cell phone. I'm pretty sure she has a recording of it.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that.
It's Mike Baden. I apologize. My computer just totally shut down. Did the meeting continue with you guys, or did you guys all get logged off?
Nope.
We
The meeting
kept going.
continued.
Okay, good to know.
There you go.
Hit record again, Mike, if it's not recording.
That is true. It is not. And we did lose everything from when it kicked out, which was about 3 minutes ago. So,
It's a good thing we're taking notes.
Yep.
Like you said. So, okay.
it appears though it continued on YouTube, so it might have continued to broadcast on YouTube.
Good.
So,
Excellent.
my apologies. I have no idea what happened. The screen went blank.
Okay. So, Mr. Sturgis, just so you're aware, our next meeting in July will be in the community center.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because the governor has lifted the order, so we're going to be back there. So hopefully you'll be able to take the short drive down and attend.
Yeah, I should be able to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just so
What
you're
is
aware.
the date of that? Is that July 15th?
Yes.
No, yeah, July 15th. At 6 p.m.
At 6 p.m. Okay,
All right.
got it.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Right.
So with that, we'll move on to the other agenda items, which the first one I just spoke about. The July 15th meeting will be at the community center, no longer on Zoom. So I'm looking forward to that, certainly. And
Meet
then,
you people live and in person.
okay, so.
First, if I can add to that, we are hoping to still do the YouTube joint broadcast, but so people
okay.
can watch, but they wouldn't be able to participate from outside, but they would be able to watch. We're hopefully by then we'll have it figured out.
All right, good to know, Mike. Thank you. So, and then I don't know if everybody's had a chance to review the May minutes. They're ready for approval if you had, or modification if you have any changes to them. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve the May minutes.
I'll second.
All right. So we'll take a roll call. Mr. Wassel,
Aye.
Ms. Bresler,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. So the minutes pass. Does anyone have any other matters they'd like to discuss at this point? I will just tell you that we did hire a new board secretary. Her name is Nicole Knapp. I believe she started either Monday or Tuesday this week, Mike. And, as you can imagine, starting a new job, she's drinking from
Started yesterday.
Yep. And she's drinking from a fire hose, trying to learn everything as fast as she can. So seems like a very nice resource, and I'm sure she'll be an asset to the town and the zoning board as well. So you'll get to meet her next meeting, I guess, if not sooner. So with that, I'll
That's
make a
good
motion
news.
to. Yep, it is good news. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second,
Okay,
Everyone seconds that one.
we don't need a
Jill,
roll
Jill
call for
beat me to it.
that. All those in favor? Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
All right, so.
Night, everybody.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for participating. We appreciate it. Have a good
Night.
evening, everyone.
Night.
Yep, bye.